Welcome back to the channel. Today's story is one that will keep you on the edge of your seat. It's about a maid whose cruelty went beyond imagination, worse than the devil himself. Parents, pay attention, because this tale is a warning and a lesson all at once. It all began in a quiet neighborhood in Lagos, where the Ogundil family lived. Their house was neat, their children well-mannered, and everything seemed perfect on the outside. But little did they know, the new maid they had hired, a young woman named Tola, carried a darkness that would soon shake their lives. Tola looked innocent at first, soft-spoken, obedient, and always smiling. She moved gracefully around the house, cleaning and cooking, winning the family over with her charm. Even the children liked her. But behind those sweet eyes was a mind twisted by envy and cruelty. She did not just want to serve, she wanted control, dominance, and a chance to make her own twisted rules inside the house. It started subtly. Food went missing, toys were broken, and small fights began to spark between the children. The parents, busy with work, dismissed it as normal sibling rivalry or misplacement. But Tola was watching, waiting, learning every weakness, every secret of the family. Then the real horrors began. She would whisper lies to the children, turning them against each other. She mocked the youngest when no one was looking, taking pleasure in tiny acts of terror that no adult would notice. The house that once felt safe began to feel tense, cold, and unpredictable. Neighbors noticed changes too. The children rarely played outside anymore, their laughter replaced by silence or quiet cries. But the parents remained oblivious, thinking it was just the pressures of school and city life. Tola's power grew with every unnoticed act of malice, her confidence swelling as she became bolder with her schemes. This was not an ordinary maid. This was a storm disguised as a servant, a danger hidden behind a soft smile. And the Ogundil family had no idea that their lives were about to change forever. Tola's subtle manipulation began to escalate. The smallest things became tools in her game. If a child accidentally spilled water, she scolded them sharply when the parents weren't around. If a toy went missing, she blamed the youngest, whispering, "You are always careless. Look what you've done." Slowly, fear began to replace joy in the children's hearts. The parents were still none the wiser. Mr. Ogundil was busy with his business deals, and Mrs. Ogundil was caught up in caring for the children and managing the house. They trusted Tola completely, praising her for her efficiency and patience. "She's so responsible," Mrs. Ogundil would say to her friends. "I don't know what we'd do without her." They could never have imagined the danger lurking in plain sight. Tola thrived in secrecy. She learned the children's weaknesses. The youngest was sensitive, the eldest prone to anger, the middle one shy and timid. She used these traits to sow discord. A whispered word here, a slight push there, and soon, arguments erupted over trivial matters. The home once filled with laughter now echoed with tension and tears. One evening, the eldest child, Kunal, accidentally knocked over a glass of juice. Tola swooped in, her voice unusually harsh. "How can you be so clumsy? You'll never learn." The child's eyes filled with tears, and he ran to his room, feeling crushed. Tola smiled to herself, satisfaction hidden behind a mask of concern. The younger ones watched her closely, sensing her power but not understanding her motives. They began to act differently around her, quiet and careful, tiptoeing through the house as if walking on broken glass. The atmosphere had shifted, the warmth that once defined their home was gone. Even the neighbors began to notice something strange. A child once full of energy now stayed inside all day. Whispered questions arose. Is everything okay at the Ogundil house? Yet, the parents insisted all was fine, blind to the chaos brewing under their roof. Tola's confidence grew. She began to manipulate the household staff as well, sowing seeds of mistrust and jealousy. Anyone who questioned her, no matter how small, became a target of her cunning schemes. The house was no longer a place of comfort, it had become a stage for Tola's dark games. Little did the family know, her cruelty would soon cross lines no one thought possible. Tola's influence was no longer subtle, it had grown into something menacing. She had learned the family's routines, their schedules, and even their secrets. Every moment she spent in the house became an opportunity to tighten her control. Small accidents now seemed intentional, minor mishaps cleverly orchestrated to create fear and confusion. One morning, Mrs. O'Gundeel noticed that some money from her wallet was missing. She searched frantically, blaming herself at first, thinking she might have misplaced it. Tola, as always, was there to offer sympathy, her gentle voice coaxing reassurance. "Don't worry, madam. Maybe it was just forgotten somewhere," she said, hiding a faint smirk that no one noticed. The children were no longer just scared of Tola, they began to fear what she might do next. Cunnel refused to speak around her, and the youngest, Bimp, started hiding small things she cherished, fearing Tola's wrath. Even ordinary chores became traps. Tola watched closely, correcting and criticizing them for the smallest mistakes, her control over the household tightening like a noose. One evening, the eldest child accidentally broke a vase. Tola's reaction was shocking. She grabbed him roughly, her voice sharp and cold. "How could you be so careless? You'll never learn." Tears ran down Cunnel's cheeks as he cowered in the corner. This wasn't discipline, this was cruelty, calculated and deliberate. The parents, though busy, began to sense something off. Mrs. O'Gundeel noticed the children's withdrawn behavior, the quiet that had replaced their playful chatter. She asked, "Is something happening with Tola?" But the children were too afraid to answer, afraid of what she might do if they spoke. Tola thrived on this fear. She had become the ruler of the household, her smile masking a darkness no one suspected. Even the neighbors whispered behind closed windows, observing the changes in the children's behavior, but the parents remained oblivious. The maid's cruelty wasn't just physical, it was psychological. She whispered poisonous lies to turn the children against one another, planted seeds of doubt, and relished in the chaos that followed. The family's once joyful home had turned into a place of tension, secrecy, and hidden terror. But Tola wasn't done. Her next moves would shock the family completely, crossing boundaries that no one thought a maid could ever reach. Her evil was about to reveal its full force, and the O'Gundeels would soon learn the terrifying truth about the woman they trusted. Tola's power over the O'Gundeel household grew stronger with each passing day. Her small acts of cruelty had escalated into schemes that no one could ignore. She began controlling every corner of the house, every chore, every movement of the children. The once cheerful home had become tense and unpredictable. One afternoon, the youngest child, Bimp, accidentally spilled some milk on the kitchen floor. Tola didn't just scold her, she snapped, her voice slicing through the air. "Can't you do anything right? You're hopeless." Bimp ran to her room, sobbing quietly. Her small cries echoed through the house, unheard by the parents who were busy with their work. Tola watched from the doorway, satisfaction hidden behind her calm expression. Tola began to manipulate even the family's pets. She withheld treats, scolded them unnecessarily, and watched with a quiet sense of victory as the children's small friends began to behave cautiously. Every living thing in the house fell under her subtle control. It wasn't just fear she instilled, it was mistrust. She whispered lies to the parents, carefully twisting minor mistakes into bigger concerns. A broken dish became negligence, a misplaced item became irresponsibility. She planted doubts about one child in the mind of another, slowly turning the siblings against each other. The neighbors started noticing strange behaviors. Children who were once lively now hid inside, avoiding even casual conversations. Whispers floated through the neighborhood. Something isn't right in that house. But the Ogundeals dismissed it, unwilling to believe that their trusted maid could cause such disruption. One night, Tola took her cruelty further. She locked the children in a room for a minor misstep, claiming it was for their own good. The children cried and begged, but her stern gaze left no room for mercy. Even the smallest plea was met with a cold stare. That night, fear replaced the safety that the children had once felt in their own home. Tola had become more than a maid. She had become a shadow over the household, a quiet storm that controlled their lives. Her malicious smile was always there, a reminder of the darkness that had quietly crept into the Ogundeals' lives. Little did the parents know, the worst was yet to come. Tola's plans were far from over. Her next moves would shatter the peace of the household completely, leaving scars that no one could easily heal. Tola's schemes had reached a new level. The children's fear was no longer hidden, it began to ripple through the household. Yet the parents remained unaware of how deep the danger had grown. Tola knew exactly how to keep them blind. Her charm, her careful words, and her obedient demeanor were her shields. She started targeting Mrs. Ogundeel subtly. When a dish was slightly burned or a chore forgotten, Tola would whisper just loud enough for Mrs. Ogundeel to hear. "I tried to help, madam, but maybe I should have done it myself." Mrs. Ogundeel would sigh, trusting Tola's intentions, unaware that each word planted a seed of doubt in her mind. Even Mr. Ogundeel wasn't safe. Tola would strategically mention minor errors or missing items when he returned from work. "Sir, I'm so sorry, but Cunnel lost his school project again," she would say, her voice soft and sympathetic. Mr. Ogundeel frowned, believing her concern, yet he failed to see the subtle pattern forming. The children were trapped between fear and silence. They were afraid to speak to their parents, afraid to trust each other, afraid of Tola. Bimp no longer smiled, Cunnel rarely laughed, and the middle child, Sod, had stopped sharing her thoughts entirely. The house echoed with quiet tension, punctuated by whispered arguments and stifled cries. Neighbors grew more suspicious. Occasionally, they saw Tola glaring at the children or heard the faint whimpers from inside. A few whispered among themselves, "That maid, there's something off about her." Yet the Ogundeals refused to believe it. Their trusted maid could never be the cause of such change, or so they thought. One evening, Tola deliberately broke a small vase, placing the blame on Sod. When Mrs. Ogundeel confronted her daughter, Tola's innocent voice protested. "It wasn't her, madam. I saw her cleaning carefully. Maybe she didn't notice it fall." Mrs. Ogundeel believed her, reinforcing the child's confusion and guilt. Tola's manipulation had reached perfection, chaos hidden beneath the mask of innocence. By now, Tola had become the silent ruler of the household. She dictated moods, conversations, and even the emotions of the children. Her power was invisible yet absolute. The family was slowly unraveling, and the parents were still blind to the storm inside their own home. The Ogundeals had no idea that Tola's cruelty would soon escalate beyond manipulation. Her next move would be shocking, impossible to ignore, and terrifyingly close to crossing a point of no return. By now, Tola's presence had become suffocating. Every corner of the Ogundeel household carried her influence. The children no longer played freely, even the sound of laughter seemed forbidden. Tola's control was absolute, and she took pleasure in it. One evening, Mrs. Ogundeel noticed Cunnel had a bruise on his arm. Panic struck her heart. "Cunnel, what happened?" she asked, concern flooding her voice. Cunnel hesitated, fear written all over his face. He knew Tola would punish him if he revealed the truth. He simply shook his head, whispering, "I fell, Mama." Tola watched silently from the doorway, a small, victorious smile tugging at her lips. She knew the parents would never suspect her. Her carefully cultivated mask of innocence protected her while she inflicted harm behind closed doors. The youngest, Bimp, began waking up at night, crying quietly into her pillow. Tola had started punishing the children for the smallest mistakes, even accidents, while the parents were asleep or busy. Each act of cruelty reinforced fear, ensuring obedience and silence. Tola's manipulations extended beyond the children. She began stirring tension between the parents, hinting that they weren't paying enough attention to the household. "Perhaps you should come home earlier, sir," she'd say to Mr. Ogundil, or, "Madam, maybe you should check on the children more often." Her voice was soft, sincere, yet laced with subtle poison. Neighbors whispered more frequently now. They saw a once lively home grow quieter, the children's energy drained, and occasional tears escaping behind closed doors. Some debated whether to speak up, but Tola's charm and the family's denial created a barrier. Her reputation as a perfect maid was untouchable. One day, Tola's cruelty took a terrifying turn. She locked the children in a room for hours, claiming it was punishment for lying about a minor mishap. The children screamed and pounded on the door, but she remained unmoved. Hours passed, and when the parents returned, the children were exhausted, trembling, and fearful. Tola presented herself as concerned, soothing them, hiding the full extent of her cruelty. At this point, it was clear, Tola was not just a bad maid. She was a force of destruction, feeding on fear, sowing discord, and enjoying the chaos she created. The Ogundil family was trapped under her control, unaware that their home, once filled with love, had become a prison for their own children. Tola's grip on the Ogundil household had become undeniable. The children no longer laughed, and even ordinary conversations felt strained. The house, once warm and full of life, now seemed tense and suffocating. Every glance from Tola was a reminder that fear had replaced comfort. One afternoon, Bimp accidentally dropped a plate while helping in the kitchen. Tola's reaction was immediate. She snatched the plate away, her voice sharp and cold. "How many times must I tell you to be careful? Are you trying to ruin everything?" The little girl trembled, tears pooling in her eyes. Tola's eyes gleamed, satisfied at the control she wielded. The eldest child, Kunnel, became withdrawn. He barely spoke, barely ate, and avoided Tola at all costs. But Tola noticed every small action and used it against him. She would whisper subtle threats, "If you don't behave, I'll make sure you regret it," her tone soft yet full of menace. Fear had become their constant companion. Mrs. Ogundil, sensing something was wrong, asked the children to share their feelings. But Kunnel and Bimp were too afraid. Even Saad, usually the brave one, hesitated. Tola's influence had silenced them, and the parents remained blind to the growing storm. Tola's cruelty extended beyond punishment. She began planting seeds of mistrust between the children. A whispered comment here, a false accusation there, and soon the siblings argued over trivial matters. Tola watched from the sidelines, silently cheering on the discord she had created. Neighbors noticed the changes too. Once lively children were now quiet, their joyful voices replaced by soft, frightened whispers. Occasionally, a neighbor would catch Tola glaring at the children as if daring them to step out of line. Whispers of concern grew louder, but the parents' trust in Tola prevented them from acting. One evening, Tola locked the children in their rooms after a minor mistake. The banging on the doors and muffled cries filled the house, yet she remained calm and collected. When the parents asked what had happened, Tola's sweet voice explained, "They were misbehaving, madam. I just helped them learn a lesson." It was clear now, Tola wasn't just mischievous or careless, she was dangerous. Her cruelty was deliberate, calculated, and hidden behind a mask of innocence. The Ogundil family was trapped, powerless against the silent storm that had invaded their home. The Ogundil household had grown silent, tense, and full of fear. Tola's control over the children was absolute. Even the smallest misstep was punished, often in cruel and inventive ways. The once lively home now echoed with stifled cries, whispers, and the sound of footsteps avoiding her presence. One afternoon, the eldest child, Kunal, accidentally tore a page from his schoolbook. Tola's reaction was immediate and ruthless. She grabbed him by the arm, her voice cold and cutting. "Do you think mistakes like this are acceptable? You must learn discipline, now." Kunal's eyes filled with tears as he tried to apologize, but Tola's anger showed no mercy. Bimp, the youngest, had stopped playing entirely. She watched silently, learning from each punishment, careful not to make even the tiniest mistake. Saad, the middle child, began speaking less, her once vibrant personality dimmed under the constant fear Tola instilled. Tola's cruelty extended to manipulation. She whispered lies about one child to another, creating arguments and distrust among the siblings. She made them question each other, distrust their own parents, and internalize fear as a daily companion. The house had become a prison, and Tola was the warden. Even the parents, once trusting and kind, began sensing tension. Mrs. Ogundil noticed the children's withdrawn behavior and silent glances. Mr. Ogundil observed small bruises and fearful expressions. Yet Tola's charm kept them from suspecting her. "I'm only trying to help, madam. They need guidance," she would say, her voice soft and convincing. One evening, Tola's cruelty crossed a line that even the parents could no longer ignore. She deliberately locked the children in a dim room for hours, refusing to let them out. When the parents rushed in, they found their children exhausted, scared, and shaking. Tola's sweet voice explained calmly, "I was teaching them responsibility, sir and madam. They must learn to behave." The Ogundil's hearts sank. They could no longer ignore the fear in their children's eyes, the trembling, and the despair. Tola had revealed herself not as a helpful maid, but as a manipulative, dangerous presence in their home. This was the moment when the family realized the true extent of her evil. The woman they trusted had become a threat to their children's safety and their own peace. The battle for their home, and for their children's innocence, was about to reach a boiling point. The Ogundil household was no longer a home, it had become a battlefield of fear. Tola's grip was unshakable. Every action, every word from the children was under her scrutiny. Even the parents, now increasingly concerned, had yet to fully realize the depth of her cruelty. One afternoon, Mrs. Ogundil tried to talk to the children gently. "Kunal, Bimp, Saad, tell me what's wrong," she asked, her voice soft but worried. The children hesitated, afraid of reprisal from Tola. Kunal's hands trembled, Bimp clutched her doll tightly, and Saad avoided eye contact. Tola, standing nearby, smiled innocently, ready to twist any attempt to reveal the truth. Tola's cruelty had become more calculated. She began turning minor incidents into punishable offenses. A spilled glass, a misplaced book, even a whispered conversation among the children became reasons for her strict discipline. Her methods were psychological as well as physical, ensuring the children felt constantly watched and trapped. One day, she deliberately misplaced important school documents for Kunal. When he panicked, she calmly blamed him for being careless. "If only you were more responsible, this wouldn't happen," she said, masking her malice behind a caring tone. The children's fear deepened, their trust in themselves and each other eroded. Neighbors' whispers grew louder. "That maid, she's not right," they would say, glancing at the Ogundil house. But the parents, still caught between disbelief and concern, struggled to piece together the pattern. Tola's charm made it almost impossible to believe that she could be the source of the household's misery. The children's silence became her weapon. Tola would manipulate the parents subtly, pointing out imagined faults, creating divisions, and maintaining her image as the perfect maid. The family began feeling trapped, unsure whom to trust, and constantly fearful of Tola's next move. One evening, Tola punished the children for minor talking while eating, sending them to their rooms and locking the doors. When the parents intervened, she smiled sweetly, saying, "I only want them to learn manners. You should be grateful, madam." The parents, though concerned, could not yet confront her without proof. Tola had become untouchable. She had transformed a loving household into a theater of fear and control, her every action carefully calculated. The family's fight for peace and safety had only just begun, but they were already facing the consequences of underestimating her evil. The Ogundil family could no longer ignore the obvious signs. The children's fear, the bruises, the quiet desperation, it was all too clear now. Tola had crossed the line, and the parents realized they could no longer rely on trust alone. Something had to be done. One evening, Mrs. Ogundil approached Tola, her voice firm but cautious. "Tola, we need to know what's going on with the children. You need to tell the truth." Tola's sweet smile never faltered, but her eyes flickered with something darker. She knew she was being challenged, and she wasn't about to let her control slip away. Tola's next moves were calculated and shocking. She intensified her punishments, using fear as a weapon to maintain power. A minor mistake became a full-blown incident. The children were punished for acts they did not commit, reinforcing a sense of helplessness and obedience. Every word they spoke, every glance they made, was scrutinized and manipulated. Kunal, once lively and talkative, now barely spoke. Bimp hid behind her toys, refusing to eat properly. Saad avoided everyone, trembling at the slightest sign of Tola's presence. The house, filled with tension and silence, became a place of anxiety and fear. Even the parents were beginning to feel the pressure. Mr. Ogundil, who had always trusted Tola, began questioning his judgment. The sweet maid they had welcomed into their home had revealed herself as a cunning, dangerous figure. The family realized that Tola's cruelty was not just against the children, it was a manipulation of everyone in the house. Neighbors whispered behind closed doors, concerned about the children's well-being. Some suggested confronting Tola, but her charm and cunning made it difficult. She had built a reputation of innocence, making accusations hard to prove. One night, Tola escalated further. She locked the children in their rooms again, leaving them to cry silently for hours. When the parents discovered them, Tola explained with her familiar calmness, "They were misbehaving, sir and madam. I was helping them learn responsibility." Her voice, soft and controlled, hid the full extent of her malicious intent. It was clear now, Tola had become more than a maid. She was a silent storm of cruelty, manipulation, and fear, controlling every aspect of the Ogundil household. The family's struggle for peace and safety had reached its critical point, and the next move would determine everything. The Ogundil household had reached a breaking point. The children's fear, the tension in the air, and the whispers of neighbors all pointed to one undeniable truth: Tola's cruelty could no longer be ignored. The parents knew they had to act before the damage became irreversible. One evening, Mr. and Mrs. Ogundil called Tola into the living room. Their faces were stern, their voices firm. "Tola, we need answers," Mrs. Ogundil demanded. "The children are terrified, and we will no longer allow this to continue." Tola's calm smile never wavered, but her eyes glinted with something cold and calculating. She knew her authority was being challenged, yet she was not afraid. Tola's reaction was a masterclass in deception. She dropped to her knees, pleading softly, "Madam, sir, please believe me. I only want the best for the children." They've been misbehaving, and I'm trying to guide them." Her words were sweet, her tone convincing, yet every movement was deliberate, every gesture carefully designed to maintain her innocence. But the parents were no longer blind. They had noticed the patterns, the small bruises, the strange silences, the arguments Tola had provoked among the children. They pressed further, demanding the truth. The tension in the room was palpable. The children peeked from the doorway, too scared to step forward, too fearful to speak. Tola's mask began to crack. Her hands twitched slightly, her smile faltered, and for the first time, her eyes revealed a flicker of menace. The parents saw it, felt it, and understood. This was no ordinary maid. This was someone who thrived on control, fear, and chaos. The confrontation escalated quickly. Tola attempted to manipulate, to charm, to plead, but the Ogundeals remained resolute. They separated the children, reassured them, and confronted the full scope of Tola's malicious actions. The house, once ruled by silent fear, began to breathe again as truth broke through her web of deception. The children, finally feeling the support of their parents, began to speak. Stories of small tortures, locked doors, whispered threats, and manipulation poured out. Tola's cruel reign was exposed, her carefully built facade shattered. The family realized how close they had come to disaster. Tola, once the master of the house, now stood powerless. Her influence, built over months of cunning and cruelty, was undone by courage, observation, and love. With Tola's mask finally shattered, the Ogundeel household began the long process of healing. The children, once consumed by fear, slowly regained their sense of safety and freedom. Laughter, once absent, started to return, though cautiously at first. Mr. and Mrs. Ogundeel held their children close, reassuring them that they were safe now. "No one will hurt you again," Mrs. Ogundeel whispered, tears in her eyes. The children clung to her, still trembling, but comforted by the warmth and protection of their parents. Tola, confronted with the truth, was removed from the household immediately. She left quietly, her expression unreadable, but the family knew that her reign of fear was over. The house, once tense and shadowed, began to breathe again, sunlight filling the rooms where fear had once lingered. The neighbors watched with relief, seeing the children smiling again, running through the yard, and playing without hesitation. The whispers that had spread through the neighborhood shifted from concern to admiration for the parents' courage. The Ogundeals had faced a cunning, manipulative force and reclaimed their home. The children slowly shared their experiences, recounting Tola's cruel punishments, whispered threats, and the lies that had torn them apart. With each story, the parents comforted and reassured them, helping them understand that none of it was their fault. The bonds that Tola had tried to break were strengthened through love, patience, and understanding. The family learned a powerful lesson: even in the most trusted places, danger can hide behind a familiar face. But courage, attention, and love can uncover the truth and protect those we hold dear. The Ogundeals promised to be more vigilant, to listen, and to act swiftly should such darkness ever try to creep into their lives again. The children, once terrified, began to thrive. Kunnel laughed freely, Bimp played without fear, and Sod spoke openly once more. Their home returned to its former warmth, a sanctuary of love and safety, where trust and care ruled instead of fear. Tola's story became a cautionary tale in the neighborhood, a reminder that appearances can deceive, and that vigilance is essential when it comes to the safety of children. But for the Ogundeals, it also became a story of triumph, resilience, and the unbreakable bond of family.